Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Welcome to the show. This is part 2 of my conversation with Peter Rios, wherein we discuss the new Teen Titans Games graphic novel. And about 3/4 of the way through the episode, we talk about New 52 continuity, along with the upcoming September Zero issues from DC Comics. And finally, towards the end of the episode, Peter has a couple things that he wants to discuss, including an announcement for what is coming next for him. Stick around. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so we're going to move on and we're going to talk about New Teen Titans Games, the event from last year.
Mm-hmm.
That for those of us who have been around for a long time reading comics, especially who fell in love with, as I did, and I'm sure you too, Peter, the New Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez.
Mm-hmm.
We get this kind of a cap, I guess, not really a cap, but this nice little treat. I'll say that. So we're going to move on and talk about that. But first, Peter, I imagine you probably get tired of this, but I've always wanted to try and stump the Rios.
Nice. Okay.
Do you mind if I?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I love me trivia.
You probably get hit with that all the time, but I've always wanted to try this, and I'm sure you're going to get these because these are all New Teen Titans related.
Okay.
Okay. And they have some relation to New Teen Titans games.
Okay.
So there you go. Well, one of them is kind of very tangential. So anyway, you ready?
Okay.
Okay. So during the new here's question number 1. During the New Teen Titans run, and that includes, well, I won't say anymore. During the New Teen Titans run, how many times was Titans Tower destroyed?
That's funny. This is tricky because on page they have said one thing, but in actuality it's quite another. Are you counting games as well, or no?
Sure. Well, let's count games.
Okay, so the first time it was, and you mean destroyed, like literally wiped off the island, right?
I'll say yes.
Okay. The first time it was when they battled Trigon in the Baxter run, where the building was totally destroyed. It was turned into stone and smashed up against them.
That's
there was
right.
that one.
That's right.
There was the one in Titan's Hunt where it also blew up. This was during the Wildebeest saga. If we count games, that would be 3.
Yep.
And now and this is where it gets touchy afterwards because I don't remember if it was still around by the end of the New Titans run. And there was the one over in with Jeff Johns' run, the Teen Titans, but I think that tower. So I'm going to say 3.
Okay. Well, I failed to stump you. That's what I had as well.
Okay, good.
But let's go. I'll give you the other questions anyway.
Okay.
Dang it! I should have did something a little harder.
The problem was, they said, I remember reading one time where they said like this is like the 4th time the tower was destroyed, and I was like, I don't know if they're making it as a joke or if they really meant, but
it's something off panel as a joke or something, or off page.
Yeah, because I mean the major times were the 2 times that I mentioned, outside of games. I mean those were, especially the first time, you were like, what? They destroyed the tower? What?
Yeah.
And then they built it back up again, and then it got destroyed again, and and then after that, when it's not the typical T shape, you sort of just go, it's just a regular headquarters. I don't care about it.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's very true. Okay. Here's question number 2. What was the name of the character Gar Logan played in Space Trek 2020?
Torque?
God, yeah, you were so good.
Is that right?
That's correct.
I almost said Turk, and that didn't sound right. And then I was like, did they even mention it in games? I don't even remember if they mentioned his name in games.
I don't think they did, but since
Okay.
he did, it's the whole television thing and Space Trek is actually mentioned in games
Yeah, yeah,
specifically,
yeah.
so I thought I would try that one. Dang it. Wow, I suck at this. Here's the last one, Peter. Um, in New Teen Titans Annual 2 from 1983, there are a bunch of villains that the Titans encounter. Can you name them?
Oh, this is uh, this is where Cheshire and Vigilante are first introduced.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you're talking Cheshire, Bazooka. Is it? I think it's just Bazooka. I'm not sure if it's Bazooka, Bazooka Joe. Um, I'm not going to get these because they were really tacky names.
I know exactly.
Uh, was one of them? Oh, oh, wow. Um, One of this I'm not going to get. There was one of them was like was a harpoon? No.
Very close.
Yeah, I can't think of what. And then there was a woman that she was like she could hit her target with anything. She was almost like a bullseye character, but I can't remember her name. And then there was a guy in a mechanical suit that something in my head keeps screaming like bulldozer or something like that, but I don't think that's right either.
Mm.
So the only ones I really know is Cheshire and Bazooka Joe or Joe Bazooka or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's true. And you're very close on those others. There was Scorcher.
Scorcher, I forgot, the fire guy, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Spear.
Spear. Okay.
And Slasher was the other woman.
Okay.
And the guy, the mechanical guy you're thinking of was called Tanker.
Tanker. So what I should have done is made the names even as if a 4-year-old was coming up with them. And then I would have got Scorcher, Tanker, yeah. Slasher.
And so obviously the reason I chose that one is because we get I think somewhat similar. So I'm not quite in the sense of the name defines the character's traits or power, but kind of really simplistic kind of names for the villains in games. So
right.
That's why I went with that.
Right. Yeah, you kind of get the sense that these villains are not going to be used too much outside of the story they're in.
That's right. Although that'd be interesting, wouldn't it, if suddenly something out of games came into the New 52 version of Titans?
Well, yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right. Well, there you go. I failed to stump the Rios.
Good question, though.
No,
those are
you're being far too nice.
No. Believe me, because somebody would have said, in New Teen Titans Annual 2, the Scorcher had how many turbine or coils coming off of his, flame or something like that. Yeah. And you're like, what? That's not a question.
Yeah, I know how you don't like those kind of questions, and I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Those are ridiculous.
They're dumb. They're too minutia. The ones you hit are exactly right. There are 6 characters, villains. That's something that you would know because they, no. And the Gar Logan question is part of his continuity. So something that is brought up multiple times, not just once.
Mm-hmm.
But so no, those are good questions.
All right. So before we get into games specifically, Peter, I just wanted to touch base with you. Like I said, I know of your love for New Teen Titans.
Mm-hmm.
And the New Teen Titans for me was my first. I'm going to collect this comic, back in 1980 something, because I actually read the DC Comics Presents number 26 that introduced the New Teen Titans in that little inset.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get that comic. But that was before, we had comic book shops and all that kind of stuff. Right. So I actually had to buy my comics from like grocery stores.
Oh yes, same, yep,
And so it was hit or miss whenever I got stuff. And so, I looked, it said coming whenever it was, so that month I went out and I looked and I never saw New Teen Titans #1 and New Teen Titans #2. And maybe I just forgot about it. It wasn't until New Teen Titans #23 that I actually saw and bought. So that's the one where Blackfire is torturing Starfire on the cover, I think.
Right. Yep.
So that's when that was actually my first issue of New Teen Titans, and I collected it from that point on. And then, of course, over time, I went back and got the rest of the issues. But I just real curious, why do you love the New Teen Titans? What about that title just speaks to you?
Yeah, I don't know. Because I had read a few other superhero comics before that, Justice League and some Marvel stuff, but there just was something about that first issue that I got. My first New Teen Titans was issue 28 off the rack, and I knew who Robin was. I kind of maybe knew who Wonder Girl or Kid Flash was. Maybe I'm not quite certain. But all these, I don't know, there was just something about it that the way the story was told, it wasn't told as like, oh, here's the villain, go beat him up, and then it wraps up. It was like, I don't even think many of them wore their costumes in that first issue. And they called each other by their real names. And the artwork was stunning. I mean, George Perez in the third year of Titans was really in his prime. And I just think it probably was because it was such a good book that I just latched onto it, and the universe was big, and I was able to go back and get all those early issues, and sort of, it was really the one that I wanted to read. And I guess I had a thing for teen books, TEAM, teen books, and also teen books, TEEN, because the other one was Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed those as well.
Me too.
Yeah, and New Mutants to a degree. I really liked that book too. So I think it was maybe because of my age, but also the stories just felt interesting. They were sort of contained universes. You were watching these characters grow, and Marv Wolfman, George Perez, they were a great team back then. So I think it just was a mix of all that stuff, and those covers were just fantastic. And I would pore over that George Perez artwork and try to copy him and draw my own characters. It's just something about it was just so good. So, that's great. I'm jealous that you were there for, the first DC Comics Presents issue. I remember talking about that on an episode going, boy, what must that have been like, to know that maybe there was a Titans-ish comic before that. And then all of a sudden there's these new characters and they're interesting. And, so that's great. Yeah, I think that's why I was a Titans fan for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really funny. Listening to you talk about this, Peter. It's like I'm listening to myself for all the same reasons you listed. That that's why I love that book so much.
Right.
Especially in regards to Wolfman's characterization of Dick Grayson. Because I know that you Dick Grayson is a character that you particularly love in DC Comics, and it was the same with me. We get introduced to this, because I knew Robin before. I'd seen him on the TV show, the Batman TV show from the '60s,
right.
and I had read, I saw the Super Friends cartoon. He was on that. I maybe had read some Justice League, or not Justice League stuff, but some Batman comics with him in it. And this was the first time where I looked at Dick Grayson as not the clownish sidekick that always needed to be rescued, but he was his own person. And he was a smart guy, and he knew how to deal with things and deal with the team, and I think that was before. I think I had heard of the Teen Titans, but I don't think I had read any of the stuff from the '60s and '70s until after I started reading New Teen Titans. So I didn't have that experience or that exposure to Dick Grayson in that role, but getting into that that Dick Grayson character, just something about him spoke to me being at that age at that time, and especially in that early, maybe the first 2 years of New Teen Titans, there was stuff going on with Dick Grayson where he was angry a lot of the time. and
Right. Right.
he was kind of turning out Batman-esque a little bit, but then they mellowed him out a little throughout the run of the series. But you have this nice character arc of him doing these things in the way that he did, and I just latched onto that, and the rest of the team as well. You get all the interpersonal relationships, and I'm not just talking about like Dick and Corey get together and all that stuff, but how the characters related to each other and all the subplots. Not just like you said, like some of the characters weren't even in their costumes, and they called each other by their actual names and not by their superhero name, which I think at that time that was the first time I'd ever encountered that. I mean, even in Legion, they didn't do that for until I think the 5 year later run. I mean, a little bit. I mean, they peppered in their real names every once in a while, but most of the time it was Legion was calling each other by their code names, and yet here
or nicknames.
That's right.
Yeah.
But here in the Titans, they were real people. They talked to each other like real people talk to each other. So well, to a certain degree.
Right.
So yeah, there's fun stuff.
It's very true. I mean, what you said about Dick Grayson is very true. I mean, I am fairly certain that the first time I read Robin in comics, it was by Marv Wolfman. I think maybe there was a Batman issue, but to me, Dick Grayson has always been Marv Wolfman's Dick Grayson, and I have never really gone back before the New Teen Titans and read those issues in like Batman Family or Batman or Detective or wherever he was at, where he was starting to have the falling out with Bruce Wayne or just having adventures. I've never gone back and read those, and I don't know if it's because maybe I just don't want, that's not the Robin I want to read, or because there's no tie to the New Teen Titans stuff. Now I've read the Teen Titans Silver Age stuff, but that's different. It is a Titans Robin, so I guess I get away with it there. But I've always thought, should I go back and read Dick Grayson before Marv Wolfman got his hands on it? And I don't know, I'm always hesitant about that.
Yeah.
But maybe someday I will.
Yeah, I'm actually the same way. Actually, I have in my head that eventually I'm going to go back because I love this character so much. I'm going to go back and find all of the, even if it's just traded, but I don't know that I can find the actual individual issues, but I like to find copies of the issues in which Robin appears, and then just kind of go through and see how this character evolved over time. But I'm kind of hesitant about that as well. I did read some of the stuff in the Batman family, those and some of the Batman title itself, and where he is kind of off on his own doing his thing. Right. Those are actually pretty good stories, for the most part, for being, I think there were only a few pages in Batman Family at that time, but whenever he got involved with Batman in a story, it's like he becomes a completely different character.
Right.
And not very interesting. It was always his solo stuff that I wanted to read more of until, of course, New Teen Titans came along. So
cool.
Anyway, so there we go. That's why we love New Teen Titans, at least in part. But let's go to the I guess this is the last New Teen Titans story, I guess, in the way that we would interpret that. So, New Teen Titans games. Peter, let me run through the credits here real quick. This was written, and as it says in the book here, written and plotted by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Art and the cover was done by George as well, with inks by Mike Perkins, Alvey, and George himself. Colors by Hi-Fi, and lettered by Travis Lanham. And it was interesting, as I was doing this research here, the inks, and this is information off the internet, so I'm hoping that it's as accurate as it can be. But the reason that we have 3 inkers here is that, of course, this was a story that was started many, many years ago, and I'll get to that in a second. And so one of the inkers started this. I think Mike Perkins. Yeah, Alvey, I think, started doing the initial inks, as I found out over a decade ago from the Perez pencils, and then Mike Perkins came in and did some pages, and then he moved on to Marvel when New Teen Titans Games was kind of on a hiatus, if you want to look at it that way. And then he came back to help finish it once they got it going again. So that's why we have 3 inkers on here. Let's see. If you read the introduction by Marv Wolfman, you find out that from his recollection, this whole thing started in about 1986. And with the initial idea, he had this initial idea of doing this, and Peter, you fill in where I might be getting my information incorrect here, but
sure.
So it started in '86. They talked about it. George kind of ran off with it too, because as I found out, I didn't realize this, but in fact, I just read an article this morning, Peter, before we started talking about George Perez's style of developing stuff. But he and Wolfman basically plotted out stuff, and then George went off and drew it, and then came back, and then Wolfman actually did the dialogue.
Right.
Which at the time when I was reading New Teen Titans back then, I just figured, not knowing anything about how comics were produced, Wolfman wrote it, Perez drew it, and that was pretty much it.
Right.
But it turns out that George actually had a lot to do with the composition of the story and influenced what Wolfman was actually had in mind in some cases with the story. So anyway, it started in about 1986 with conversations with George and the powers that be at DC. It was supposedly to be released in 1990, which I did not know until researching this. Although I think I do remember, well, that was again before the internet, so somehow I have a vague recollection, or maybe I'm just making this up thinking I knew something I didn't, but I seem to have a vague recollection of hearing this news that there's this new thing coming out, a graphic novel of the New Teen Titans, and I remember being excited about that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then there was, then it kind of went away. It didn't happen. If you read the introduction, or if you read anything about the background of this graphic novel, George did what was it, 60 or 80 pages?
Yeah, I think the number that seems to come up the most is somewhere around 70. So
okay,
it's like an average, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm. And so he had done that work, but then Wolfman had a bad writer's block, he said, and George was busy doing this and doing that, and it just kind of fell along the wayside. And then in 2004, it was announced again that they would be doing this, and that's when I definitely knew, okay, here we go. This thing that I remember hearing about, or it's going to be coming out very soon. Well, and then it was off again. This was 2006. It's like, everybody kept asking, when's New Teen Titans Games coming out? When's it coming out? And, it wasn't coming out as of 2006 anyway. And then finally, 3 years later, it was back in the news because they were talking about a 30th anniversary release in 2010. And I think that's about when things started getting going for real, and for sure we're going to finish this.
Right.
But they did miss that. That would have been nice, wouldn't it, Peter, to seen that on the 30th anniversary?
Yeah, just missed it.
Yeah, just missed it just by several months, but
several months, yeah.
But it did finally come out on September 21st that week in 2011, just as the New 52 was rolling out at the same time, which I thought was a really curious decision on DC's part. But at least I finally got to read it. Some 23? No, how many years later was that? A long time.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I mean, if it was 1990, that's when it was supposed to come out. Then technically
that's right. Yeah,
21.
Yeah.
But who knows? Yeah.
Over 20 years.
Yep.
And then we finally get New Teen Titans Games. So there you go. What an interesting. And I'm really surprised too that DC finally decided to put it out. I mean, there was no reason for them to do it at this point. Even though they had some of the art done and the story worked on and all that. I mean, unless they were trying to really go for that 30th anniversary release, I don't know. Do you have any information on that, Peter?
No, the only thing I could sort of think about is, you know, they probably thought they were just leaving money on the table if they didn't, and maybe, I mean, certainly, there's precedence in when Perez finally got Marvel and DC to do the Justice League Avengers, right?
Mm.
Justice Daily Avengers, and after how many years that was put on the shelf, and then it was finally brought back. So, maybe DC said, look, here's this other unknown Perez project, and there's certainly a lot of work that's already been done. It's not like some of those other projects that go by the wayside, and like at one point there was supposed to be a Firestorm graphic novel called Corona, and it was talked about in a few letters pages back in the 80s in Firestorm, but it never surfaced. And then I think some of the material or some of the stories that Jerry Conway wanted to do with it wound up being one of the annuals, actually. So it's much different than that, right? Like that didn't really have a lot of work put into it. This one had a lot of work put into it, and somebody had those pages, and I guess maybe DC just felt, let's just do it. We have it. Let's do it. Yeah, it would have been nice if it came out for the 30th anniversary. I doubt it was a huge seller, but I'm sure there were a lot of devoted Perez fans out there that needed to have this.
Mm-hmm. Me being one of them.
Yeah, and me.
Just to see the new Teen Titans, the way, the team that I loved,
Right.
be back yet again for one more story.
Right. And so, it was. I mean, they certainly, very in the introduction, he treats this as, yes, it's a cap to their working relationship, but it's also, they said it's sort of out of continuity, and to some degree it can stand on its own. Whether they succeeded or not, that's something we can talk about. But it was meant to be a standalone story as much as it could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit, and like you said, we can probably talk about that in a little bit, but I did go through and try and place this as if it were in continuity with the issues that had come out, and I don't know that I was successful. I did find one specific reference in one issue of the New Teen Titans that could kind of place this story, place games, within that context, within that time frame. So,
where did you fall?
Okay, so there is a reference in here. Well, not a reference in games, where Gar Logan has that hairdo, his mullet style. And so I was looking for that, and there was an instance in New Teen Titans number 71 where Gar is at the opera and he references his new hairstyle, which is that same hairstyle.
Wow.
And there's also in that, I can't remember the issue now. I didn't write it down. But he talks. Well, I thought it was related. It actually isn't, because there's in the scene in games where Gar is coming out of that school,
right?
And he mentions how he basically his dad threatened him if he didn't go to the school. Dayton said, "I either come here or I'm out of the Titans." And there's actually a scene in one of the Titans comics after 71 where. Or I think, I'm sorry, it's not that. It's in the 50s after the Who is Wonder Girl story.
Right.
Where there was a scene where Dayton actually says, "Okay, you're done. You're done with the Titans." Huh. So I think, and I read this too today, where George was talking about the story and the evolution of this, and there were pieces of games or ideas that they were developing, way back when, for games that actually made it into the run of New Teen Titans.
Right.
So I tried to place it, but really it's you can't to a certain degree. But I did find that specific one in New Teen Titans 71. So I kind of placed it there, but it doesn't work because that's the start of the Titans Hunt storyline, I believe. So it wouldn't work out, but it was a fun exercise anyway.
No, I think it's hard, and there's somewhere, I swear, I think I read somewhere that even Who is Wonder Girl was supposed to be an original graphic novel that
Yes.
they split up.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. I
yeah,
read that too.
yeah, and I know in that storyline they don't take Danny Chase on that grand space adventure, and I can't remember. My Titans reading after that is a little spotty, but memory wise, and I want to say that Danny wasn't really part of the team that much when Wonder Girl was Troya. So
Hmm.
I'm always of the mind that, when you have Troya on the team, Danny Chase is not on the team, but I could be wrong. So it is hard. It's really hard to place, and certainly to try to play, because they say it is a standalone story. Maybe at the time they wouldn't have done it, but over the years they just had to do it, because there's no way you can sort of reference the book because the book hadn't been out for 20 some years.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
you sort of have to make it its own beast. And they did. They certainly pull it, because even Cyborg's characterization in the graphic novel and games is quite different to what he was at that time. He wasn't as angry. His characterization in the book really felt more like the first and second year Cyborg, not New Titan Cyborg to
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
So there's some of that as well.
Yeah. It's a really interesting. Um, what's the word I'm trying to think of here? Never mind. It sits in this weird bubble, I guess, of
Yeah,
trying to fit in, but it can't and it doesn't, and the incongruity of, like you say, Cyborg, of some of the characterizations, or maybe even some of the timeline that's going on here. It's a weird kind of story for us old fans to try and latch
yeah,
onto in some ways, I think.
yeah.
All right. Peter, do you want to give a brief synopsis of the story?
Sure, as much as I can. So basically, there's a war games type scenario situation going on, for lack of a better way to describe it. And a long-standing DC character and a long-standing New Teen Titans supporting character comes to the Titans and requires their help in this, basically what he calls a political governmental war games type affair,
Hmm.
this situation. And the character is King Faraday, who is a longtime DC spy thriller character, and who Marv Wolfman would play with in the New Teen Titans every now and then. And they don't trust him. They're not quite certain why they should be involved in such a thing. And he eventually manages to get them in through nefarious means, almost to the point of blackmail. And it turns out to be this grand adventure against a character called the Games Master, and it puts the Titans up against various villains, various nefarious characters who are threatening other supporting characters that are in their lives, like Cyborg's grandparents and Donna's husband and Changeling's family, and so on and so forth. So they're battling these villains, all while Nightwing is trying to figure out what is exactly going on. And it turns out, lo and behold, that the Games Master is actually Faraday himself, and it all wraps up back into him, and they stop all of his plans, and then it ends, more or less. It's a little bit. There's obviously a lot more to it than just that, but that's kind of your basic nutshell
Hmm.
synopsis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good one. I like that.
Okay.
Um, excuse me. So I was just first of all, Peter, what did you think of the format of the book? Because most graphic novels nowadays are kind of in the same relative size of the comics that you buy every month, and yet this was an
Hmm.
oversized book. Which my take on it, obviously you get George Perez doing stuff like this, then you want to give him a larger canvas.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was actually, when I actually received the book in my box from DCB Service, I was surprised to see the size of it. But it was a delightful surprise. I was just curious what you thought of that.
No, the format was, I thought, great, and it was kind of fun to see, some of these characters larger than life, larger than we're used to, and allowed for some detailed work that Perez is so well known for.
Mm-hmm.
The format, no problem. I enjoy formats that are off the out of the box,
Yeah.
from regular comics. So that was great. No, I thought that worked in its favor, and it's relatively cheap too.
Oh
For
yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of George's propensity for detail in his panels, the first page, you get that bottom half of that kind of like a wide shot of that area that's been attacked, and you look at that and all the destruction that's going on there, and all the people down below, and there's a helicopter hovering up. You get that. That's a completely George Perez panel right there. And then throw on top of that the snow. The effect of the snow on this page is that was the first thing that jumped out at me. It's like, wow, that looks really good.
Very cinematic, right? Like, just sort of, you're trying to look at the details, but you can't because it's a freaking snowstorm.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
And to tie it back to Rachel Rising just for a second, because they're about midway through the 4 or the 8 issues that we read, it starts snowing there in that story, and it's a very different take on the snow. I mean, it still works, I think, in both stories.
Sure.
But if you contrast the two, it's interesting. Maybe just to me, but
no. I because that actually speaks to something about the art that I liked about this about the book, was that much in the same way that JLA Avengers was Perez kind of throwing in all of his tricks of the trade.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that was going on here as well, not to the same degree, obviously, but
right.
But this was like his entire visual arsenal was unleashed on the book to varying levels of success. And that first opening chapter, and also something that happens later on in the book, threw me all the way back to Crisis, where in issue, I think it's number 3, some of the heroes and villains go back to World War II, and they go back to a scene. They go back to Markovia, which is
right.
Geoforce, of the Outsider, his home world. His home country, but back in World War II days, and they did snow there. And what they did was one of the first times that they used, instead of actually using white, they basically used negative way. It was, I think they used black, and then when they printed it, they just printed it as white or something like that. So it was sort of like a reverse sort of way to do it. Like, you're almost instead of actually drawing the snowflakes, you're just taking away the image.
Oh, right.
The art, and it had that sort of like, I don't know, looked like a bunch of holes, but it worked. It was effective as snow. And that when I saw that and then saw games, I was like, oh my God, that's kind of like that, So really, a lot of this was like his way of pulling in all the things he's learned over the years.
Well, and how much of a I don't know, experience was this for George? Having done so many pages back in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, and then coming back to it and finishing it up in 2010ish. And he actually does talk about this in his afterword in the book, about trying to kind of gel his style back then when he first started that to what he's doing now, and trying to make sure that everything flows and there's not this jarring. Oh wait, here's George Perez back in the 80s and here's George Perez now. But how I would think that would be kind of a weird experience coming back to something that you started so long ago, and then trying to finish that story now. From a creative standpoint, that would just be a weird experience.
Right, and you would look at these pages because, that's really all that existed. I'm sure for you, for me, for a lot of these people, were the pages. We might have. I know I've saw these black and white pages for a long time, off and on, on the internet, and go, wow, there's that original graphic novel that never came to be, and I certainly couldn't figure out what the story was. So here he is trying to mix his styles. And how do you not just see some of that older stuff and want to either tinker with it, number one,
Yeah.
or go the way that he did and sort of say, well, let me try to match my style these days. Because his style these days has gone a little bit back to his original early amateur days where his characters are a little softer, they're a little rounder, a little more cartoony. And you get a mix of that in this book, especially with all the different inkers. And I have to say, as much as I love Perez, the artwork and the story, I think they both sort of there's stuff that gets detracted from both of them because of the distance that both of these, this creative team has had on the book. Perez talks about manipulating his style, like you said. But with the different inkers, there are some pages every now and then that kind of feel less finished than ones that maybe he inks himself or that Alve inks. I'm having a hard time sort of determining which pages are which inkers.
Yeah, I try to do that too, and most of that's just my ignorance of not knowing certain inkers' styles.
Right.
But
right.
I did look for that, and you can kind of see it a little bit in like characters' faces. Whether the inks are heavy or light and whatnot, but yeah, it was really difficult for me in any way to figure out who did what when.
Yeah, and my hope, my sort of thinking is, you kind of hope that Perez inked pages that were really loose, right? Because he would be able to sort of know what he wanted to do or whatever. And you hope that the ones that are a little bit tighter are the ones he gave off to the other inkers so that they didn't have to do too much work. Now, having said that, his inker, Alve, he inked Perez during the Kurt Busiek Avengers run. So I kind of have an idea of what that looked like. So I think I know sort of how that looks like in this book, which then makes me think the pages that look kind of not finished, I kind of want to say those are probably the Perkins one, which is kind of a shame because they're the ones that I like the least. And they just don't seem fully formed just yet, and the inking over Perez looks very different in my brain to all the other inkers that Perez has worked with. So it makes me think, well, I guess that must be Perkins, because I'm not familiar with that kind of look. So yeah, it gets a little disorienting every now and then. It's not kind of like the tour de force that JLA Avengers was, which I consider to be Perez's masterpiece. Like to me, that is and always will be, because even Crisis, and I say this quite a lot, and I think people forget, Crisis had some very heavy-handed inkers because Perez was doing some very loose layouts, especially by issue 4, and you got like Giordano and Mike DiCarlo, who especially DiCarlo, who's a very heavy inker, and you sort of see his style more than you see the artist. And then when Ordway came on to Crisis, that's when the book sort of got its defining look, but that wasn't until issue 5. So Jerry Ordway inking George Perez is really what most people think when they say George Perez on Crisis. It's not, there is no true George Perez on Crisis. Only on the covers is he really doing his own work. And maybe the first issue, I think. But the majority of the rest of the issues, from 5 on, that's all Jerry Ordway doing inking over Perez. So, for me, JLA Avengers, that's like pure Perez. And this is, I like it, but I'm having a hard time saying I love it. And that's, I feel that way about the story too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was slightly disappointed in some aspects of this.
Yeah.
despite my overall love of these characters at this time. So
Right. And it's certainly not. I've read worse Titans than this. I've been at their low point. Even with Wolfman and Perez, I think there's one or two stories that you kind of just read and you're like, oh, okay, that was that issue, but I don't
hmm
need to read that again, or
hmm
whatever.
yeah,
Um, but the story is like that too, where I think the distance of time, and they certainly say in the two intro and afterward, where they're both going, we forget how this damn thing was supposed to end, so we kind of just sort of had to make it up, and they say it's a better ending, but some of the details have changed. So there's even one or two scenes where, even more than that, where you're kind of reading it and you're going, wow, this really feels, knowing what I know from Wolfman and Perez about how they say this story changed over the years, this scene feels not like what he drew, you know?
hmm
It sort of feels like this is a new way that Wolfman and Perez were going to do this scene. Because they talk about how like all those villains weren't connected originally,
right.
and they weren't working for the same character, and now they are. And you know, I know that all the things that as they were trying to disrupt New York, and um, for those people who haven't read it, a deeper meaning in the story is that the New York was going to be blown up so that the governments would. It's a very Watchmen thing, so that the governments were going to get together and try to make sure that everybody works together. Sacrifice 3 million for 300 million or whatever the story was.
Right.
And some of those individual villain scenes and battles and fights, I don't know, just came across kind of awkward.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Especially that whole bit where we about the middle of the book where we have all those fights between the Titans and these villains. It's like
Mm-hmm.
what? Well, I have another issue with that, but yeah, it just come across very awkward. Yeah. I think you have a pretty good introduction to the story, and then the ending once everything is kind of laid out for you what happened, then you kind of have a nice ending to it. But yeah, that middle section was for me was kind of what's going on here? Why are we doing it? Why is it being done this way as opposed to another way? Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It's awkward is the correct word for this.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, like I said, I do like it. I'm glad it's on my shelf. I'll keep it. I won't sell it on eBay. It's part of the Titans history. But and there are definitely some things to like about it. And the death of a major supporting character came as a shock.
Oh yeah.
I was surprised by that, um, and and the Faraday thing is actually interesting. I kind of liked that. I think somewhere along the line, somewhere in the middle of the book, you start to go, okay, I think I know how this is going to play out.
hmm
Um, and it does eventually play out that he's the mastermind behind it all, sort of. So, I'm glad I read it. Like I said, I wanted to love it, and I really want to know, somebody who doesn't know these characters. I wonder how it works for them. Did they get enough characterization to understand who this team is, and did they get enough background to understand why it's such a major part of DC history? And did they just get a good story? There's a lot left on the table there because we're familiar with these characters, right? So there's a lot of subtext and inner character play that is not even on the page. It's what we're bringing to it. Like I thought the scene between Cyborg and Raven after the death of like one of the supporting characters, he goes up to her and she's like, "Oh my God, it was all my fault," and he says, "No, it was my fault." That was an interesting scene, not because of what was on the page, but because that was rare. Cyborg and Raven rarely had a scene like that in
Right.
their ongoing story. I mean, they worked together. He certainly appreciated everything she did, and They had some moments here and there, but nothing like that. I was like, whoa, that's huge, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the I think one of the better scenes as far as interpersonal stuff goes. It's like it was a nice surprise
Hmm.
to see that. Yeah, definitely. Well, so you're mentioning a couple times now the death of a supporting character, and that was so. Let's just lay that out on the table.
Right.
So again, but you're talking about how much do we bring to the story? Do any new readers who are not familiar get enough of that? And I think maybe in this case you do, in the sense of you understand that what we're talking about is Sarah Sims,
Hmm.
one of Cyborg's longtime friends, at least in the series. That they met in, was it number 8? New Teen
I
Titans
think,
8, was that the Day in the
yeah.
Life
Yep.
where
Hmm.
she first appeared? Yeah. And she helps kids who have lost limbs, and so you get that, and in order to save them from a bomb on a field trip bus, she drives that bus away, and unfortunately it explodes, and
Hmm.
Sarah has died. And so what I talking about continuity and all this stuff like we were before. Had I kept coming back to this, Peter, when I was reading this. Had this come out when it was supposed to have come out, would this have? I think in terms of this graphic novel would have changed the direction of the main title to some degree, and that's one of those things. Not to mention King Faraday, who came into
Right.
Titans every once in a while, but to have Sarah die in that way, how that would
Hmm.
have changed Cyborg's character, and what direction would they have gone with that? And and also the Raven's sibling that
Right.
shows up
Right.
here. Now I don't remember exactly, Peter. If this had come out then, that would have been the first time we had seen a sibling of Raven, isn't that right?
Right. Yeah.
Because then
They 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 played with later sort of like the seeds of Trigon,
the
or
brothers.
they're sort of like the and this is even during the New Titans run, not even during Jeff Johns' run, but the idea of un children that were killed, and
Oh, right. Hmm.
this was I guess it was after issue 100
Yeah.
of the New Titans. They started
Yeah.
messing around with Trigon's brood, or the seed of
Yes.
Trigon. I forget
Yeah.
what they called it,
Yeah. That's about the time I started going. This comic isn't as much fun as it used to be.
But there is something interesting about Sim, like that hurt them killing off Sarah. That would have been very interesting at that time. They didn't mess around with the supporting characters too much. They left them live
Hmm.
for the longest time, and it was, sort of the reason why the characterization of Cyborg before she dies, and he's sort of rough and tumble even before it. I almost would have seen, had he been sort of like the level-headed man that he is, and then that happened, and then he went a little bonkers. Then I think that would have made a little more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. That
Because
was a misstep, I think.
yeah, it was so huge, that, and I thought it was well done, that scene, the whole lead up. Everybody's going, call Wally, get a hold of Wally, he can get there, and nobody can get there in time, and Raven wasn't there. I like that scene. I thought it was effective.
Yeah, and just the pacing, the way that George, cuts here and cuts there, and continues that on. That was really, I think, really suspenseful.
Hmm.
The way that he pushed that story, and then there's the explosion, and you get that, and this is the page. All you see is Sarah's eyes, and this small panel at the top of the page, and then you get this nice, how George likes to put things in boxes
Right, right.
on a page, a sequence of boxes, and you basically get that because it's all the sound of the feedback, I guess, of the explosion
Yeah.
coming through, and it's just these jagged red E's going across, and in each E is a different character, the way that they are reacting to this
Hmm.
sound, and that event. That I thought very well done, very good stuff there.
Yeah. That was at the point that I sort of, and maybe a little couple more issues after that I started to think, oh, I know where it was. Yeah, it was when it was after the scene with Cyborg and Raven where you meet the guy who actually set off the bus bomb,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gets shot by somebody in the shadows, and I thought, oh, did Faraday do that? Did he make that happen so that the Titans would be involved? Now, I still wasn't thinking that he was the games master at that point,
Mm-hmm.
but I was certainly thinking he was behind that.
Oh, see, now that would have been a more interesting take on the story.
If he sort of planned that just to get them involved,
Just to get them, yeah, as opposed to being behind the whole thing.
Which,
Yeah.
They say in their description of the book that the ending is different. That the games master, I think, was supposed to be a character. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe they were going that route. Maybe because the guy who shoots the guy who set off the bomb, he looks, even though he's in shadows, he's got a gun, he's got a suit. It kind of screams that it was Faraday,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of wonder if maybe they were going that way, but then they just decided to make it Faraday altogether.
Yeah. Yes, to me that would have been a much better take on the story, though.
Yeah.
King Faraday is kind of up until this point, well, first of all, he comes across as, at the beginning of the story, he's like this pompous ass,
Yeah.
ordering Nightwing, hey, well, first of all, encountering him, training in the park, and Dick he's out of costume, and Faraday's just standing there waiting for him. Is like, okay, Nightwing, get the band together. I got something to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm.
As if Nightwing, works for him. And then there's also a scene where they eventually do come together in Titan's Tower, and this is where I don't know who inked this part, but regardless, the panel where Faraday just kind of you just see a headshot, a 3/4 headshot of him,
Mm-hmm.
and he's kind of looking away from the characters, and he says, "I thought your people were prompt," and it's not what he says here, but the way that the character is drawn, it's like, this guy is such a dick.
Absolutely.
But for so yeah, he's kind of this, like I said, pompous ass kind of character, ordering these kids around to do what he wants, and they initially refuse. But so for him to go off and manipulate things to get them to do this, to the degree of killing one of their friends, see, that would have been, I think, just an amazing story point.
Yeah. This is one of those sequences that I'm having a real hard time figuring out who is the inker on it, because when you go a little bit further into that sequence, when Gar and Danny have that little fight that really just comes out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those pages, the inks are very light. Then you turn the page where Dick is yelling at Garfield, and suddenly the inks are very heavy. They everything gets kind of dark compared to where they just were. And I'm kind of like, that kind of looks like Perez, but the stuff before it also looks like Perez, but is it Alvey? And I don't know. So yeah, it's hard. I would love to know who's done what.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that particular page, right? Where Nightwing is yelling at Danny and Gar. That's where I have in my notes here the colors, especially Nightwing, that panel with Nightwing, and there's another one down below, but the colors on that page just are really rich, the blues and everything, and I think that maybe contributes to what you were saying about the darker inks, just the inks combined with these rich kind of dark colors on that page, I think contributes to that, but yeah, it's. Yeah, I like that you mentioned too that the characterization between Danny and Gar, how they're at each other all the time,
mm-hmm.
and I know that was part of it in the series too, whenever Danny was around, but you're right, it did seem like their little tiffs just kind of came out of nowhere.
It kind of felt like Wolfman doing characterization 101. He wanted the readers to know that these two characters often butt heads.
Yeah,
and that was his point to put it in there, but
to do it, I think that there's at least 2 or 3 of those scenes throughout here where that happens. And I on one hand, that makes sense because of what happens at the end of the issue with Danny, and it seems like that he and Gar have come to come to terms with how they feel about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so to contrast that with, they were jerks to each other beforehand. Yeah, okay, I can see, now with this tragic thing that happens to Danny, a change of heart here. But
Yeah. And
yeah.
Wolfman even says, he wanted to write Danny's sort of redemption in a way, if not for the people reading it, for himself.
Mm-hmm.
He felt he never really got a chance to write Danny in a way that the audience, because back then everybody didn't. There's a lot of people that did not like Danny Chase, me included.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and when he had his little thing at the end, I was like, okay, that's obviously Wolfman saying, okay, here's a way to sort of put a cap on Danny. Maybe it's a little bit forced that we're now supposed to feel sorry for him, but I got it. I was like, okay, he saved the day. His hands got blown up. Gar, was worried that he was going to die, and there was a real moment there where he was saying, Danny really is a hero. So I thought that was interesting, and it adds a nice little final point for the character,
Mm-hmm.
especially knowing that what we know about Titan's Hunt, and the character dies anyway during all that. So,
right.
Yeah.
So there was a couple other things I want to just make note of this, having to do with the art. Like I said, as I was reading this, I was taking notes and just kind of noting things that kind of popped out at me. And there's one scene here that I want to. I'm not gonna be able to. Oh, here we go. It's the scene right before Faraday meets Dick in the park,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the scene right after the cloisters scene as well. But there's the top panel. There's a strip there where someone's pointing a flashlight at a file cabinet, and it's just this very simple. It's a black background, and you see the flash of light, the circular flash of light on the file cabinet, and that's it. And I thought, wow, that's a really nice, simple way to show what to move the scene, or to introduce the scene, and you know exactly what's going on, and it's just a very effective, simple bit of artistry, I think.
Right.
And maybe maybe a little too simple, but I really enjoyed and there were things like that throughout this book. Like I mentioned the Peresian use of boxes. And you see that there's a scene with Corey. They're filming a commercial, which that was a weird thing to me. I know she did in the comic she did like photo shoots and stuff,
Right.
but for her to be helping to sell a car, I thought that was an interesting progression of that. I guess I don't know. But it just kind of struck me as weird that a Starfire would be doing that.
I think there's precedence in her being a spokesmodel.
Is there?
For,
okay.
Yeah, I think there is precedence for her selling, being something to sell something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember, and I did not want to go back and. Well, I do want to go back and reread all my Teen Titans stuff, but I simply didn't have the time to do that. And then there's that scene where Raven is in Azarath, where you get that really almost like charcoal effect.
Yeah, I love that.
Of the art. Yeah, that's a perfect. And thinking back on how Azarath has been portrayed in the past, this is a really, really dark interpretation of that dimension or whatever it is, but very effective.
Yeah, it sort of brings back the early Baxter Run stuff, although they used like an amber color with all that dark charcoal stuff. But no, I thought that was really well done. There's a lot of the some of the fight scenes, Donna in the subway, even if it didn't necessarily make sense or was interesting, it at least was really good. The fight scene with Dick and the strategist is really awesome. I mean, Perez's fight choreography is always top notch.
The silhouette panels that was really nicely done.
For me, I always look at Perez as, if you have if you have the two schools of thought, say you put like Neil Adams and Alex Ross on one end, and you put, I don't know, somebody really cartoony on the opposite end, like really cartoony, like Jack Cole or I don't know, some along those lines, Phil Foglio or I don't know, something like that. Perez kind of always seems like he's in the middle,
Yeah.
especially at his height. He has his own style that is based in reality, but is still cartooning or comic book, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Superhero. It's very superhero. It's very much in the superhero comic language, without being Kirby. Even though he certainly used Kirby's tricks earlier on, he has his own tricks now. So he always is like right square in the middle. It's good superhero comic book art, and some people don't like it, and I certainly understand that. But for those of us who do, and who grew up with it, it's really is nice. And there's some pages in here that are really nice, like those some of those battle sequences are really cool. I think I went into this wanting, which is always a mistake, right? Your expectations are always the wrong things to go into when reading a story. But I guess because JLA Avengers was so chock full of Easter eggs, I thought maybe this would be too, but then I thought it would be like a Titans Universe Easter egg hunt. But then I remembered, well, technically this was coming out at a point where it didn't have to be that. So, no, it makes sense that there wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
It would have came out when everybody was familiar with the material, so it didn't matter. I almost wonder what this would have been like had there been a story but no art, or maybe just a hint of a story, and then they just decided to do an original graphic novel anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but had to start completely from the ground up.
Oh yeah.
I think we probably would have gotten something a little more like JLA Avengers, where it was like really a love letter to the series, as opposed to just yet another story, which I totally get that that's what this was. I understand going in that this was a lost project. So yes, I understand why it feels like that, and maybe why I'm not so attached to it. But it would have been also interesting in another world to get, their swan song and have it be a love letter to the larger Titans universe.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. I agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to mention about the art, because I love this. I love this scene here. So you get the fight between Raven and her sister, whom she names Azara at one point. Right. So on one page you get it's just a page of basically, I think of it, it's a special effects scene, where Raven's attacking her sister's soul self. You get the white of Raven with the black, and then everything's red around it. But then they clash, and then you have this explosion of souls, and Raven comes out on top, of course, because that's what's got to happen here. So then her sister dies, but and then this is the scene that I really love, and I think maybe this has more to do with the color artist that did this than perhaps the George or whoever inked this page. But that scene where Raven is transporting from Azarath back to the cloisters, and you get her in the middle of her soul self, and her soul self is slowly shrinking down as she transports back in there. Just those few panels there, just again, very simple. The color palette is very limited, but yet it's very effective and invokes this sense of movement when there really isn't any.
Right.
I just think that's lovely work that they're doing there.
He's really good at transitional sequences.
Mm-hmm.
Things that might take place over just a couple seconds, and he allows them to have room. Kind of like when Dick is training in the beginning, and you're seeing multiple images of him running. And I love the sequence where and obviously this is done out of necessity, but where Jericho is at the Renaissance Fair, and he gets a phone call, and he spells out Titans, right? So instead of doing a shortcut way of, maybe using the same image of his face over and over and just changing the hands. I mean, all of it is, he's giving him different facial features in all 6 of those panels, and that's cool. Like, he's not taking a shortcut to his artwork. He really, right down to the Titan's Tower when you're in their meeting room, and boy, that's looks so familiar, with the T and the chairs with their little symbols on the back and the pictures up on the wall and the circular staircase coming down. I mean, that's such a, when I look at that room, I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the image that's burned in my head about what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too about the transitional thing, because that's one thing that I kind of miss for at least the stuff that I'm reading. Whenever I see you got multiple panels basically showing you the same thing.
Right.
And what I see a lot nowadays with artists, and I don't know if it's just time or maybe they think this is the way to do it. I don't know, but they seem to just do a repeat with changing something very slight. And it's not, but and that scene that you mentioned with Jericho, it's the same kind of thing, except the slight changes seem to convey more to me than stuff I'm seeing nowadays in other comics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a, I don't know, I miss that. I miss that about in comics in general. That this is art. It should be moving things forward and not just, like you say, taking that shortcut.
Right.
And it really makes me appreciate and miss George's work on say a monthly title or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole other topic and tangent, but I remember reading somewhere an artist saying something like, oh well, readers these days, they demand that artists are so perfect in their craft, or that they put in all the best they can put in every page, and that's the reason why books are late and blah 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 blah. And I wanted to stop and say, no, we just want it to be exciting and good, because look, I like John Romita Jr., but you ain't going to tell me that John Romita Jr. draws Iron Man's costume the same way on page 1 that he does on page 8. I mean, he takes shortcuts. I mean, he's an expressive artist. He's not worried about making sure that every piece of armor on Iron Man's skin is exactly the same as it was 2 pages earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but he's exciting, and for those people who like him, I like him. He's exciting. He's comic book art. I love it. We don't want artwork to be. It doesn't have to be Michelangelo every page.
Right.
It's just got to be good and exciting. So, all those artists out there who are taking their time because maybe they think we want it to be, I don't know what. Just do your style and make it good and come out, and put it out. I don't. Here's Perez, who kills himself every issue because that's what he wants to do. But then there's someone like Mark Bagley, who's very loose, and his characters, certainly his faces don't look the same from issue 1 to issue 8, because he's going really fast and he's not worried about specific details. So, but yet it has life. When he's on a book that is good for his style, like when he did the Thunderbolts way back, it meant something. Every panel, every page, every detail, because it was something that he was into. So yeah, I agree. That sometimes I think the shortcut, the tricks that some artists use these days are actually hindering them, because it just comes across kind of stale. And when you get too lifelike without any energy, or too I don't know what it is, too let me use computers for this, and let the colors be real muddy and dark for this because it'll look like a video game or whatever. I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't like it.
Yeah. And I wish I was more versed in the artistry, the language of it, because I feel like every time I try to talk about the art in a comic book, I'm missing so much I don't have the tools, the proper tools to talk about it. So, um, but we are talking a lot about the art, and I want to get to some of the things you had said earlier about the story and some of the ways that it was, awkward and maybe disappointing. Um, did you want to talk about any specific things or?
Um, no, I think it just was the way the story just sort of progressed, and um, I, it's hard. They're racing against the clock against the games master, and he's trying to blow up New York, and he's using the Titans because he's familiar with them, and maybe on some level he thinks they're going to stop him. He thinks they're going to stop him. I don't know. It just and it really felt like they almost I don't know, like it didn't have to be a Titan story. Um, and one of my biggest sort of misgivings about it, and I usually never really try to focus on. It's kind of hard. It's like I like to talk about the things that happen in the book, not the things that didn't happen in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking Titans and you don't have any scene where they all come together and shout Titans together and they work together to they have this amazing sort of plan that Dick worked out, and they work together in these interesting ways, and their powers are put together in interesting ways to defeat the villain. I'm like, well, then that's not really a Titan story, is it? I mean, that to me is, I think of like Trigon and Judas Contract and Terminator, where they join up together, and Dick knows just exactly how to use everybody's powers and abilities and talents, and then they save the day, yeah, this one, I don't know. I just as I was reading it, I realized I was more and more sort of just reading it to read it, and that it would never live on as one of my top 10 or even my top 25 Titan stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I really can't say much more of it because the history of the project is probably the thing that's most interesting about it, and also the thing that kind of holds it back a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's a little unfortunate.
Yeah. That's you said it perfectly. I think about I hadn't really something was bothering me about this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and that's exactly it. It was that the Titans weren't. I mean, they come together at the beginning for a very brief moment, to basically tell Faraday, "No, go away. We're not going to be your lapdogs." And then, and then they do come together again very briefly before they go off to do basically what is the rest of the book, and that's to fight the villains. And they're all separately doing this thing, and that's precisely what's been bugging me about it. It was the fact that they were not working as a team.
Yeah.
To do this stuff, and then I try not to focus on the negative, but something about these scenes where the Titans, Dick sends them off to fight, to do these investigate or to encounter these villains, but everything was too on the nose. The particular Titan was sent off to deal with the particular villain that was set up to take care of that particular Titan. And I thought, Dick being the strategist that he is, I would think he would see that and maybe do something different. I don't know.
Yeah, and especially because you never really got. I mean, I never really got how they all connected. I mean, you kind of did. They were closing off all the points into New York and trying to blow up the one bridge, and but the girl that Troya fought in the subway, I guess she disrupted the subway lines, and then she's fighting Donna Troy, and then Donna's talking about this dragon thing. I just was like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just none of it ever really seemed to in a book called Games, all the puzzle pieces just never really seemed to fit perfectly.
Yeah.
And just not what I would. Yeah, I don't know. It almost seems like had they come together and done this book, and maybe this was Who is Wonder Girl, like they were trying to tell that story from New Titans 50 and 51 and all that. Like that would have been great because I love that story.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a little more Titans-esque. And this one, it really does feel like an unfinished product. You sort of go, oh, this is why this was a lost project. And it feels like a time capsule, a lost, or something that was meant to be done in a different time, and it just doesn't feel right. And again, like you said, I hate to focus on the negative, but just it was good. I'm glad I read it. Good in the sense that I'm glad I was able to read it and that it came out and all that. But I don't see people walking away going, "Wow, that was amazing."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned this too, going in to something you're going to read with certain expectations, and I don't think it would be very hard, I think, for someone to not do that who is a fan of the New Teen Titans and of Wolfman and Perez's work on that. To come into this and not have any expectations, it would be very difficult. I certainly didn't do it. I couldn't do it.
No.
But I read it. I enjoyed it for what it was. I like I said, I keep saying this, but I really like seeing this group of Teen Titans together again, even in a perhaps an okay story. But the art was lovely.
And Nightwing in his disco collar costume, man. Don't get better than that. I love that costume.
It was that costume was perfect for him. Tying into his circus days.
Oh yeah.
As compared to what he's wearing, wore later with basically that black with a little bit of blue and now the black and red suit. But
right.
So maybe to wrap this up, but at the end, you get the aftermath of the story, and you find out that Danny now has prosthesis arms and hands because the bomb he was trying to defuse, he was able to contain the explosion, but not but at a cost. And so you see that, and maybe where that I think in terms of what would they have done with that? Again, had the story come out when it was supposed to, with Sarah dying and Danny being in this situation and Titans Tower blowing up, which you get that full page spread of the Titans Tower, the explosion. But after all this time, and after how many times did we see Titans Tower be destroyed? It's like, well, it's kind of lost its impact. But you see all these changes that would have happened, or may have impacted what was to come in the main book back then. So I kind of like the thinking about that. So at least I have that from this story. It's a bit of a snapshot in time. Harkening back to something that I've loved all these years, and what would happen there. And then at the go ahead.
Oh, one quick thing about the tower blowing up. Following Cyborg's dialogue about his father built this tower, and that he built it. He would be proud that it was that his accomplishment was going towards saving the day. Was kind of interesting because I guess what they're saying in the games world, in this thing, the tower had never blown up before, which means when they were battling Trigon, which it did, they destroyed the tower at that point. I guess maybe what they're saying in this story is that never happened, or at least that part of it never happened. That this was supposed to be the first time the tower ever blew up, because they rebuilt the tower after that, and his father didn't build it. Obviously, I mean, they used his notes and all that, but so I thought that was interesting that they were trying to suggest that this was the first time, and then maybe that's again why it didn't have as much impact with me, because I was like, oh, they're trying to say this is the first time it blew up. Oh, okay, well that's cool. Technically, it's not, but okay, that's cool.
But it was nice that exact scene that you're talking about. You get Speedy there and Aqualad and Lilith. So you get more of that Titans. Oh, and Wally shows up as Flash. So you get our larger Titans family showing up at the very end. So that was kind of nice to see. I would have liked to have seen more of that throughout the whole thing, but And then at the very end, those 3 panels at the very bottom of the last page, where Cyborg and Nightwing are talking, and then then it felt like a little bit of like coming home to me in the sense that you get this banter between these two characters. A little bit of humor to kind of pull away from the tragedy that we've seen in the story so far, and that was kind of nice. It was a nice little thing. The Titan's jet flying over the moon or in front of the moon there, as a nice cap to the story. I thought that was kind of neat. I thought the dialogue too was a little, I don't know, Buffy-esque. We are so doomed. Which is that I'm sure there are thousands of characters in the history of literature that have said something along those lines. But when I read that, I immediately went to that first episode of Buffy where Giles basically says that and then walks off. And I kind of got that same sense of humor and tragedy all wrapped up into that.
Yeah.
So that was nice. Oh, and Garfield finally has his hair back.
I like that.
I hated that mullet.
I wasn't a fan of that costume either at that point. It was sort of like a little twist of his original Titans costume. I never really cared for that.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah.
All right.
Have to say.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just when you're talking about the dialogue, I did like one thing that a couple things actually that Marv Wolfman said in the intro. First, at some point, either in his intro or Perez's outro, they talk about Crisis, and they call it a maxi series. And I thought, yay, they used that old terminology again, because nowadays everybody always just says limited series, whether it's 2 issues, 4 issues, 12 issues, 24 issues, they just say limited. But back at the time, if it was 5 and under, it was a mini series, and if it was 6 and over, it was a maxi series.
Yes.
So I love that.
Yeah.
But the other thing Wolfman said was, we talked a lot about Perez and his art and having to adapt his art and all that. But Wolfman very openly and honestly says, I writing is very different now. So I had to think about that. And how does that change how I write and approach the material? And I like that. I kind of dug that about what he said, because a lot of times you get veteran writers who kind of push against the way comics are written today. For good or whether it's better or not, that's not really what I'm talking about. But comics are very different these days. The way they're written, the way they're approached, whether you want to call it deep impressed or whether it's just the tools that they use or the execution. It is very different. And sometimes when you read older writers writing books today, you're like, oh boy, is this is so out of date. It almost doesn't feel like it has a place anymore. And I kind of like, whether he succeeded or not, I like that Wolfman at least addressed that and was big enough to say, hey, the writing has changed, so I should be aware of that. I kind of like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. The fact both of them trying to adapt to the current climate. That to me, that to know that about them makes me just appreciate their work all the more, even if it wasn't as successful in the execution that I would have liked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Anything else about new Teen Titans games, Peter?
No, it's there. It's finally out. Between that and JLA Avengers, I can't think of anything else that I want. Paris certainly has a lucky life. He was able to do these big projects, and hopefully it gave him some money. And I hope in his time as a comic artist in the next couple decades, I know his eyesight is going, or not going, but he's had surgery and stuff. And I am very thankful that his projects at least have made it out, and that we have this material.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, because I haven't checked on this, do you think DC will release a trade version of this, or are we just is the hardback going to be it? Because I can't see them doing that, is why I bring it up.
Yeah, it probably depends on sales, and I can't imagine that this was a runaway success. I mean, I think what we got is what we're going to get. Yeah. Especially now with the new reboot,
Yep, definitely. Yeah. Well, speaking of the reboot, I wanted to ask you, you are reading the new I should rephrase that. I was going to say you are reading the new Teen Titans book, right? You were reading the new 52 Titans book. Is that correct?
No, it's not actually.
Oh, okay. I thought I'd seen that you were getting that, but
Getting it, but not haven't really delved in much like all
okay.
the stuff. And I can't say I'm all that looking forward to it. I'm prejudging. I totally know I'm prejudging the book, but I'm kind of like, in a way, this is kind of like this could be a segue to if you have any question, if we talk about like what I'm going to be doing in podcasting. But my grand goal for a lot of the DC 52 stuff before the year anniversary is to actually go through and sort of month by month look at each issue and see how the universe has developed and what has changed, and try to lay out the first year of books. So eventually I'll read Teen Titans, but I can't say I'm overly, and then the spin-off, the Ravagers book, which I also got, but is waiting, in the DCBS package. I'm like, I don't know. Whereas I think I'm going to enjoy the Legion corner of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I think my Titans days are probably over on some level. Yeah.
Well, I have to say I thought the same thing. But when the new 52 was announced, I was looking at all the titles and stuff. I decided to I pretty much bought all the 52 stuff, at least the first issue. There's a couple that I skipped, but Teen Titans is one of the ones that I got, and I was actually surprised at how much I was enjoying, certain aspects of it. It wasn't, not all of the books are, runaway hits to me. They're not, I'm not talking about sales or anything, but in terms, personally, how much enjoyment I get out of it. Teen Titans is, it's a fair Midland book right now, but there are certain aspects of it that I wish they would just move on from. You'll probably see that when you start going through them.
One of the things, though, I do know that I'll be able to do more than some podcasts that I've heard, even on CGS. This whole reviewing the new books with a nod to why reviewing the new books against the old universe, which I think is a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that a lot, from various reviewers or read reviews where they're like, oh, well, this doesn't work because in the pre-reboot days, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you can't do that. I understand you can do it as a fun exercise, but as a criticism, it kind of bugs me a little bit because this is a new thing. So unless they say specifically something has or hasn't happened, it's kind of hard. You can't just take everything for granted. You sort of got to say, all right, this is the way it is now. If character A was left-handed before this and is now right-handed, well, he's now right-handed. You can't say, whoa, when did he learn how to write right-handed? It just some of that kind of bugs me. It's like, no, you can't do that. No. I mean, you can, but I don't know.
It's an interesting time for me, and I'm sure a lot of other comic book readers, DC lovers, because there's so much undefined right now.
Sure.
They rebooted this, and who knows if because we know that certain elements that we have read in the past are going to come back in, but we don't know which ones and how they're going to change things and what's going to be different and where are they going to go with this, and it's in many ways it's very exciting, to discover this as it's happening, but also for me it's kind of frustrating because I want to know this stuff. I want to know if, like, when the new 52 and was announced, and Teen Titans was going to be one of the books, but it wasn't going to be the classic new Teen Titans run of characters. Was the new Teen Titans as we remember them, are they now part of this continuity, or are they out? Those kind of details. Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of looking forward to, and I know some people aren't, but I'm looking forward to the Zero issues coming out in September, to start that process of filling in the blanks, and I hope I hope it's successful in the sense that I feel satisfied with that. Of course, I want more,
Right.
just because I like history. I like the history of these characters, and I want to know what's happened to them and why they're
Right.
here and how that affects what we're seeing now.
And this, those Zero issues coming out in September, that's a very real example of be careful what you wish for on some degree.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people who are calling those Zero issues, they're sort of saying, oh, it's just a cash grab, it's another, sort of numbered juggling thing, are probably also the same people when the first issues came out said, well, did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? Well, guess what? DC heard that and said, okay, we're going to tell you what happened. So sure, they could have done it maybe in a much more natural way,
Yeah,
organic way,
yeah,
but here you go. A whole month, 52 issues or whatever it's going to be of all origin stories, and if you want to know, buy it. If you don't want to know, you know what? Take a month off for DC, and then come back the next month. And
well,
I'm sure those stories are going to proliferate throughout all the rest. So
and we were talking much earlier about the risk that DC took
yeah,
relaunching their entire line. This is kind of a risk too. It might be a little less risky than relaunching your entire line, but the fact that they're not they're coming out with just those Zero issues. They're not releasing issue 13 at the
right,
same time. They're basically suspending their numbered line for 2 months.
yeah,
And that's to me that's just crazy. Why would you do that? Why not offer it at, as Marvel double ships? We essentially have that same kind of situation here with DC. Not that I want them
yeah,
to do that, but
right.
it's just a I can't get my mind around some of these decisions that they're making and the risks that they're taking.
Yeah. Well, at least this. I mean, they did it before. Zero Hour, right? Zero
No,
Hour
that's
was a
true.
whole month of Zero issues way back in what, '94, whenever that was.
Hmm.
And a lot of this, I love hearing, and I'm sure you were around at that time too. But like what you said about what is in and what isn't in. We we played this game after Crisis.
That's
After
true.
Crisis, it was
Hmm.
like even with Superman, even with the Byrne revamp, we were like, well, what's in, what's not in, and we had to wait until they told us, and they sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't.
Yeah,
What was in, even like Justice League, what stories existed now,
mhm.
which ones didn't, because technically Wonder Woman wasn't around back then, so
Oh yeah, that's right.
you sort of had to play that game with that.
But even then, of course, it happened over time. It wasn't like all at once. But you got Man of Steel, and you got
Hmm.
JLA Year One. To kind of fill in those things as these separate publishing entities from
Right,
the main books. And
right.
we're not getting that right now. All we're getting so far is what happens to be what little tidbits are dropped in the monthly issues, and then now these Zero issues. So it's
Yeah,
a very different. Um, Publishing space that DC's in right now. It's very
yeah.
weird to me, and like I said, it's kind of exciting too. So,
Yeah. And you kind of think of it like, what if, think of it this way. What if DC had just burst on the scene in September of 2011? What if we never knew about DC
oh
before that,
wow.
right? And suddenly they laid out these 52 titles. Would we have asked these same questions? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe we would have waited. Maybe we would have
Hmm.
waited and and as and let them tell the story they wanted to tell. So I think part of and this is, if I was publisher of DC when they were going to do the reboot, uh, when Flashpoint came out, those 5 months of Flashpoint and all those crazy spin-off miniseries that they had, I would have not published any other book.
Hmm.
I would have wrapped up my entire line before Flashpoint came out, because basically Flashpoint, with all of its crossovers and miniseries and all that, it basically had the same amount of books that they were putting out before there was Flashpoint. I mean, there was that many titles. So, and then I would have allowed that 5 month gap to happen, and then lay your reboot out. So then it wasn't like new. It wasn't like the new universe was smack up against the old universe. It would have had that 5 month buffer, kind of like what Flashpoint really was, kind of like DC's version of Marvel's Age of Apocalypse in like 94, 5, 6, whenever that was, where they stopped all the X-Men books, just did Age of Apocalypse for 4 months, and then started the X-Men line, all the X-Men books up again once they were done. And it kind of felt cool. You had this little interruption and then they could just start wherever they wanted to start. So had they done that way with Flashpoint, I think we would have had a little more distance from the old universe to the new universe, and maybe not so quick to compare the two, and our expectations might have been different. So, but they didn't do it that way. So they didn't call me up and ask my advice.
Well, okay, so I want to wrap things up on the comic talk, but it's a perfect segue. Speaking of asking what you think, there's the new was it Nielsen survey that DC has out?
Oh, right, yeah.
Did you participate in the previous one, or have you done the second one?
I did the first one. I haven't done the second one yet.
Okay, yeah, I just did that last night.
Okay.
So it's a little different, as you would hope that it would be. That they're not asking the same questions.
Right.
So yeah, at least I actually really appreciate the fact that they're soliciting that feedback. Depending on what they do with it, that's always the question. But I like being able to feel like I'm participating in that way within the medium that I so much love. So.
And I'm sure what always strikes me so funny is that there are people who saw the results of the first one and were like, oh, it's the same old story. And then you're like, but then I want to ask them, okay, did you take the test? Like I know some people probably aren't taking it that probably should. The point is, if you're reading any DC book, you should take the survey. If you're not reading any, because I also saw there was somebody who wrote in that they aren't reading any DC titles. So then that at a certain point the survey said, okay, thank you, you're not who we're looking for. And they were like, well, I guess they don't want my opinion. It's like, yeah, they don't want your opinion because you're not reading their books. So why? Yeah, it's like it frustrates me, some people.
Yeah. All right. So Peter, is there anything else you'd like to add? I know there was a few things that you wanted to bring up at the end of the episode.
Yeah, just if you don't mind, real quick.
Not at all.
If people are still listening by this point, they're like, wow, this is a long episode.
It really is.
That's all right. It's been how many months since I've been on, well, I mean, I did the Uncanny X-Cast and another podcast, but I have a lot of hours I need to catch up on, so This is good. There is a fund going on, a pledge drive that I started. There's a new convention called the Morrison Con, which is a convention for Grant Morrison. It's going to have a 1,000 attendees only.
Really?
It's not going to be, there's only 1,000 tickets. It's not going to be your usual convention. It's going to be more almost like a TED Talk kind of thing, I imagine. And it's going to be in Las Vegas. And it's going to have Grant Morrison and Robert Kirkman and Jason Aaron and Jonathan Hickman and Chris Burnham and a whole bunch of other people. So, I love Grant Morrison, and I was like, oh, that'd be great to go to. But I've had my 5 minutes with Morrison at another convention, so I didn't feel like I needed to go. And there was another guy, Julian Lytle, who people might know from the webcomics Ants or from his various podcast appearances. And he's a huge Grant Morrison fan, and I love the way he dissects Grant Morrison and talks about him. And he wanted to go. He heard about it somewhere, and he said on a forum, boy, I would love to go. So I got the crazy notion of trying to raise money to get a ticket for him and to send him to Morrison Con, send Julian Lytle to Morrison Con. And I had two goals. The first goal was to get the ticket, which was a $699 price tag.
Wow.
And then the second ticket was the flight to get him out. The second goal was the flight to get him out there. We met the first goal, and thank you for everybody who donated. We got the ticket. The ticket's purchased. It's got, I plunked down the money, and then as the pledges came in, we covered all the cost of the ticket, and the organizers actually chipped in as well, which was amazing. So the first goal has been met, and we are close to halfway to our second goal of getting a plane ticket. And obviously the plane ticket is a lot cheaper than the ticket price of the convention. So because the ticket price of the convention also includes the hotel and all that. So
okay.
Yeah, it's a hotel in Las Vegas, and one of the nice hotels there, so that's cool. So yeah, we're a little bit shy of 50% of the second goal, which is only around like $300-400 that we're trying to get for the plane ticket. We're trying to get a cheap fare out there. And if anybody wants to help, they could email me, peterjohnrios@gmail.com. That's Rios spelled Rios. And it's a cool thing because he really deserves to be there. He's an interesting guy when he talks about Morrison. And I don't know. I just felt like I could use the power of Twitter and all that, and maybe I could make this happen for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's working. So that's cool. It's say one thing about the comics community, they're very supportive, and I think that's awesome. So hopefully we can. I mean, he's definitely going either way. Even if we don't get to the second goal, we'll get the ticket to get him there. But anything that anybody can help pledge, we're only really asking $10 from people. If they want to donate more, great. If they can't donate 10 and they want to donate less, that's great too. We are going to get him there. Me and a couple other people put our heads together, and if it has to come out of the rest comes out of our pocket, that's fine. That's cool because we got this far. So yeah, it'll be cool. So hopefully people are interested, and they can email me if they want more information.
Excellent. That's really cool. I knew about this before because I follow you on Twitter, and I heard about this. So yeah, that's really neat. I had no idea that Morrison Con was only 1,000 tickets being sold for that.
Yeah,
that's
very
really
limited.
Because when you first said that, I'm like, oh, maybe I can swing that. No, I don't think I can swing that that price tag. So, but I like Morrison too, but I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm an uber fan. So if someone is really into Morrison like Mr. Lytle is, let's we can give him a hand there. And I've heard Julian on the show on CGS, and I've always liked the stuff he has to say. So yeah, that'd be nice to help him out.
Oh, I think it would be a very interesting meeting of the minds.
Yeah. Well, and I'm jealous too. You mentioned you had your 10 minutes with Grant Morrison. I would love to. I don't think I could sustain a conversation with him for more than a minute. I'd be a blubbering fool. But it'd be nice to just say hi and tell him how much I like his work.
Yeah. That's I can't say I wasn't a blubbering fool. I don't remember. I can't remember if it was like a New York or San Diego. I can't remember where it was. But it literally was 5 minutes just for me, not even for CGS. And I never even really talked about what we talked about. I just met him for 5-10 minutes, and it was awesome. It was just exactly what I would expect it to be. And I didn't feel like I needed a huge, half-hour session or anything. I just wanted to say what I wanted to say, and he talked to me a little bit, and then that was it. And I walked away, and I was like, I just met Grant Morrison. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. So Peter, what's next for you? What's going on?
So what's next for me? I've been getting a lot, especially at Denver Comic Con, a lot of people saying, when are you going to get back in podcasting? When are you going to get back? What are you going to do this thing? Yeah. And I've certainly teased it on Twitter and elsewhere. And I realized that July 1st, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but July 1st, 2012 will be exactly 1 year since the last time my voice was heard on CGS.
Oh, okay.
I put out the Best of Drunk Cap episode.
Yes.
And that was the last episode that I recorded my voice live in a studio purposely for the show. That there was one of their recent episodes, they gave me an award and I did a call-in thing, but that wasn't live. And then, 10 months after that, I was on the Uncanny X-Cast, and now I'm on here. But as far as CGS, that was the last time. So I thought, years gone by, and in that year, I wanted to see, where the podcasting land was going to go and what I could do. And I sort of had some thoughts, and really I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of stuff written down. And it really, as Mr. Phil from the Inner Spinner Act podcast said to me out in Denver, he was like, you just need to do it. And he's exactly right. I mean, That's the advice I give to a lot of people. Just do it. It's like, stop thinking about it and just do it. And I'm like, all right. So come July, I'll say July 1st, but who knows, but come July, I'm just going to put out an episode and see what happens. And it's all under the the website's not up yet, but it's going to be the Daily Rios is the sort of like the overarching title of everything. But what that means is I could do anything, which I normally do anyway. I usually post something in it every day anyway, whether it's a blog, Tumblr post, or in the future it'll be a podcast. Maybe it'll be a review, but it'll all be daily, Monday through Friday. Some content will come out. I don't know when the website will be up, but there'll be something daily. My hardest thing was trying to come up with a title. I just couldn't come up with a title. What do you come up with a title? What's the title of the podcast? Well, and then I started realizing, God, I want to do so much. I want to get back to the Titans. I want to get back to just talking about comics in general. I want to do a podcast that's not comics, And I realized that it can all be a title, right? Everything could have its own title. Like I'm going to bring back the Tower from CGS.
Which is excellent.
Basically it's my show anyway. So, and I told them, I said, well, that's the one thing I'm going to take. So, the Tower will come back. So the beauty of it is when it gets released, the Daily Rios, whatever that is, whatever the website's going to be, if it says the Tower, well, then that means I'm focusing on this. And then one of the other projects that I know I'm definitely going to do, and I haven't talked about this to anybody except I think my girlfriend. I've noticed in my collection I have all these trades that I just have not read, or if I did read them, I didn't finish them, or it's been a while. But most of the time, it's a lot of trades I haven't read, or graphic novels I haven't read. And I said, all right, I'm going to write a list, and I came up with a list of all these trades, and I'm going to do them, I don't know, maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, and I'm going to burn through the list. And because there are 50 of them, I'm calling it the 50 Trades of Rios. Instead of 50 Shades of Gray, I'm calling it
there we go.
50 Trades of Rios. I don't know if I'm doing these as blog posts, Tumblr posts, or podcasts, but I'm going to burn through them. And I can get your opinion on this. I don't know. Should I release what all 50 of the trades are, or should I just do it as I go?
Oh, I would just do it as you go.
Do it as I go. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if people would be interested in what the titles are. Or maybe I guess as you see it, you're like, oh, that's cool. Because a lot of these they're not all Marvel and DC. There's Marvel, DC, Archaea, IDW. They're all over the place. Some are real independent. There's just all this stuff I've collected over the years, and some of it's current and some it's not. And one of them is, I can say this, one of them is a listener during the CGS days so graciously gave me all 10, I think it's 10 volumes of Why the Last Man.
Oh.
And I've never read them.
Oh my gosh. You're in for a treat.
I've never read them. Yeah. So that'll be one that I'll space out throughout the whole process. So,
yeah.
So that'll be at least one that people will know about. So yeah, so all of that, I don't know how it's all going to work out, but we'll see. Starting July, it'll be a much more definite push, and it'll be me back doing what I love, talking about comics and podcasting, and we'll see how it goes.
Wow, that is excellent news, Peter. I'm very excited about this. I can't wait for it now.
I know. Now that I've said it, I got to do it.
That's right. Yeah, just do it. Yeah, that is so awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you're coming back to it. I've always enjoyed your work on CGS, of course, and I was quite sad actually when you announced that you would be leaving. So I'm really glad to hear that you're coming back to it. So
cool.
Thanks. And so appreciative again. Thank you for agreeing to come on my show. It's been an honor. Having you on here, talking with you. It's when I first got into CGS and listening to you guys, that just opened up basically a whole new realm for me in terms of fandom and appreciating comics and just talking comics and everything that goes with it. And you were a large part of that for me. You and Brian and the rest of the guys. I just really enjoyed that, and I'm so glad that you're coming back to it. So.
Cool. No, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate. And like I said, I appreciate that you allow me some time here. That's awesome. And keep up the good work with your show. And let's do it again down the road. I don't know. Maybe there'll be something that will come up, or maybe if I catch up on the Titans or something, or maybe during 0 Hour, I would love to come back and talk some more, or Rachel Rising catch up, or whatever.
That would be fantastic, Peter. I would very much love to do that again. And
Awesome.
and also just I wanted to mention too. You mentioned your Tumblr posts. I tell you what, those have been a great entertainment for me. The way that you're doing your numbered.
Yeah, the countdown.
The countdown, yeah. You know what? I this I'm gonna sound really stupid now because I didn't get it at first. What you were doing. I read your posts. I don't know how. I won't say how long, but I was reading them. I know, and I was enjoying your comments about this stuff, about each issues that you've had in your collection, and at one point I'm like, wait a minute, why did you comment about an issue that was before the one you just commented about, or I can't remember. Anyway, and then it finally struck me what you were doing. You were counting down the days of the year that relate to the individual issues that you were commenting on. It's like, that's a brilliant way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm way behind. I backed myself up about 3 weeks. I got to catch up. It is counting down to something. I know some people have caught on you have to almost go back to when I started it, and I guess you have to know a little bit, maybe something about me to figure it out.
Okay.
But it is a countdown to something in my life, actually.
Okay.
And like I said, it's kind of hard because I've gotten backtracked. Once I catch up, maybe it'll reflect again. Because then you could sort of, especially like when I get to 100, you could sort of go, well, what's 100 days from now? What is it? So it's just something silly I've been doing, but I love it. And it's got more interesting as it goes along. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like once I get below 100, because I know I've collected a lot of issues that are below 100, you know. Like, imagine when I get to 10, I'm going to have to do like 20 posts on just 10 alone. So I think I'm in for a lot of trouble, but I do like it. And it kind of made me go back and go, oh yeah, I forgot that was in my collection at one point. Because I've sold off a lot of stuff along the way. Mm-hmm. And no, so good. I'm glad there's people, reading. That I love. In fact, an interesting thing happened when I posted for 180. I think it's issue number 180 was the first Uncanny X-Men book I picked up off the shelf at the time of its release. And I think Ryan Dunleavy, artist of Comic Book Comics and Action Philosophers, he replied and said, wow, he says, I think that's my first X-Men issue too. So that was kind of cool. Like, and then somebody else said that a certain book was their first, whatever was their first title of that, or first issue of that title, And so it's kind of cool to get the feedback and have people sort of say, oh yeah, I remember that issue.
So will you continue to do the Tumblr posts, or will the new thing, the Daily Rios thing, kind of take that on, or are they related somehow?
Yeah, no, I'll still do the Tumblr, and then whenever I get the website up, it'll sort of connect to it. It'll just be
okay.
Yeah, but no, I'll still do the Tumblr. I like Tumblr. It's a interesting way to use to talk about comics and through a visual sense. And
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And really the doing Tumblr is the reason why I was like, I'd really love to do like a website and just sort of talk about comics at my own pace, and use it for like the podcast. And you can put audio stuff on Tumblr as well. I almost there for a while was like, why don't I just put the podcast on there and just have people, download it off of there? But I never got around to it. So no, it'll all be connected, and it'll all, even the stuff I do on Twitter and elsewhere, and stuff I haven't done in a while because I had no outlet for it. It'll all sort of channel through whatever the Daily Rios becomes. It's a little bit of a vanity project, I guess, more than anything. I mean, ultimately, it's really the podcast will probably be the forefront thing, whatever that turns out to be. So, the Daily Rios is just somewhere that I can just post it all up in one place as opposed to all over the place. So yeah, so it should be fun.
Well, whatever you're putting out, I'm looking forward to it. So
cool. Thanks.
So will you be announcing the website on Twitter and to get people to find out about it, or
sure.
anywhere and everywhere that you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's sort of why when we talked about it on here, I was like, hey, I'll say it on here. Maybe people they'll listen and they'll come over and check it out. I really appreciate the listeners allowing me again to play them in your sandbox and talk on your show, and just I love the medium. I love the format. I love podcasting, and it really is just a great way to sort of stay connected with everybody. And so yeah, no, you know me. I'm shameless in my my whoring out of myself.
Well, I think you have a lot to offer, and like I said,
thanks.
I'm repeating myself, but I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait to see and hear what comes next.
Awesome.
All right. And Peter, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you again. It's been a lot of fun, and you helped pass my Sunday along as my girl's up in New York watching a Broadway show without me.
I'm actually kind of jealous that she's doing that. I would love to do that too. So I've not seen that show.
Yeah, she's going to see Newsies. So
yeah.
It's well, thanks for taking me. But as from what I hear, she planned all this before we started dating. So I guess I have to believe her.
All right. Well, Peter, thanks again. Gosh, I can't say thank you enough for doing this. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
You betcha. No problem there. All right, that's the end of the show. I hope you've stuck around this long. But if you have, thanks for listening. And that's it. Goodbye, Peter.
Goodbye. See you, Eric.